Okay. Okay. So last class, we were learning about pass by value and pass by reference. Okay. So before that, we also saw what is an object, what is a class, and all that. So we saw a .java file. This is called as a source file. Once I compile the .java file, what does it become? The .class file. And we saw in Java, the .class file is what is also known as the bytecode, which is also known as the intermediate language. So in Java, this .class file is the executable file. This .class file can run on any platform specific JVM that we saw yesterday. So this is our base operating system. It could be Windows or it could be Linux. And on top of our Windows or Linux, we will have the Java virtual machine. So Java virtual machine is a virtual machine that you cannot touch and feel. It's just a software that uses the resources of the base operating system. That means it uses the memory or the computing power. And this computing power or memory is what is given to your program in order to execute. Which program? The .class file, right? So why is Java a platform independent language? Is because its executable file, which is the .class file, can run on any platform specific JVM. Okay, so it's like this is kind of like the translator. This is going to translate from this .class file into the native operating system language, so that the operating system can understand that. So when I'm saying native operating system language, I'm talking about C or CPP. Generally, most operating systems are written in that particular language, right? And that operating system will convert that C or CPP code into what? Those are OS calls, system calls. They will convert that into the corresponding machine code, which is ones and zeros, which my base machine will understand. The hardware will understand. Hardware understands what? Machine code, which is in the form of ones and zeros, right? So we saw this yesterday. Then we were also discussing about the pass by value and pass by reference. Okay. So we saw that when we are doing pass by value, like in this particular program, when we are doing pass by value, so we created two date objects and we displayed the date value before swapping, and then we pass the D1 and D2, both the date objects references. Okay, but I'll tell you why exactly I'm calling it references. Okay, because this D1 and D2 happens to be what? Local reference variables. So I told you yesterday what is the difference between a reference variable as well as a pointer. In a reference variable, you cannot perform any operations. No plus plus, no minus minus, nor can you actually see the value that is stored inside D1, right? But when it comes to a pointer, you can actually access the actual address that is there inside memory. So Java is a bit more secure in that respect. Means in programmatically, you can never know where exactly is the object stored in memory, right? Now, see this. So when we first created, this is the first object that we created, and this is the second object that we created, both. So all objects in Java are created inside heap space. All objects dynamically at runtime. That means just you writing this particular line will not create the object until and unless you actually do run the program, right? So when I run the program, that is when the object is being created inside the heap. Okay. So dynamically at runtime. So these two objects are created. Then we also discussed yesterday that every thread has a stack of its own. So main method is a thread. So I will not be going into this detail of this because one few students had asked me the details about this thing. So at this point, I will stick to the webinar's motto. And then, of course, if there's a course that is offered, then we'll go into every single step. That is including data types, including control flow, if, wells, with switch case, everything will be covered. Okay. But at this point, we'll stick to the webinar's topic. So over here, we're going to have a stack. So main is a thread. It has a stack of its own like this. And inside that stack, we are going to push what? Local variables. So D1 and D2 are local variables. How do I know it's local variable? Because its data type, its declaration is right in the method itself, right? So you know this ARGS that is used to take command line arguments. That is also a local variable that is to main method. Okay. So I have not depicted ARGS in this, but you should understand this is also local variable. So this is also pushed into the stack, right? So we have D1, then we have D2. Okay. Then we also passed it to swap, which is D1 and D2. So when I passed it into swap, what happens? It is having its own local variables. So swap is being called by main method. So what happens? A separate stack frame is created. When a method calls another method, a separate stack is not created. Separate stack is only created until and unless that is a separate thread. Okay, swap is another method that is being called. So it is going to be called creating a separate stack frame, or it is also known as activation record. So it has three local variables in fact. One is D1, one is D2, and the other one is temp. So we have those three pushed, and then we use the temporary variable to swap the values. Right? So D1 and D2 values got swapped, and then we said D1 is pointing to 200 and D2 is pointing to 100. But when we did pass by value, what happens when the end of method is reached? That time what happens? The stack is popped. Okay, the entire stack gets popped. So if the entire stack gets popped, then the memory of the swapping is lost. So in that case, what happens when you come back to the main method? When you come back to the main method, you are left only with the main D1 and D2. In that, there is no swapping that happened, right? And because of that, we'll get the previous value itself. So pass by value means the swapping will not take place, right? Now we'll see pass by reference. Okay, so yesterday we did write the program for pass by reference. Okay, but I never drew a memory diagram for it, so we'll just draw that right now. Okay, so we have in order to do pass by reference, I'm using an array. Okay, so you can ask me, without using an array, can we do it? Yes, you can, but I'll discuss it after I show the memory diagram. Okay, so now over here in the array, it's taking two locations. So let's draw the memory diagram. Okay, so let me just fine. So first line, we're going to create an object of array. So array, even though I write new operator or don't write new operator. Okay, so you might ask, without new operator, what do you mean by that? Okay, that means if I just write like this, d, okay, equal to, I'm writing member initialization list like this, new date in bracket 2 3 2020, like this. Okay, just by writing member initialization list, this is also a perfectly valid array. That is why I'm telling whether you write new operator to create the array or not. This is new operator to create the object. Okay, whether you write new operator for array or not, the object is always created inside the heap. Okay, in this case the size is 1, automatically it takes. Okay, so you can write an array like this, or you can write an array like this with the size specified. Okay, so over here what happens is that first objects are created where? In heap memory, right? So I'm going to have my heap space. Inside that, we are going to have the array. Okay, array has two locations, 0 and 1. Let me imagine that the array's address is, say it's in 100 location, right? So now see, this I have done. Now, DARR of 0. So do you see the left hand side is what? DARR. That means this DARR is a local variable that is stored inside main.ka stack, right? So how do I know it's a local variable? Its data type is right next to it, and that data type happens to be within the main method. So I'm going to have a main method. So main method has a stack of its own. So I'll just consider this as a stack. Okay, this is specific to main method, and in that stack, what is being pushed? DARR, local variable. This local variable is pointing to this array's object. So I will have this pointing here, right? So this one's value will be what? 100. Fine. So my first line is over. Now second line, DARR of 0. In the 0th location of the array, I want it to point to an object of array. How do I know this is object, actual object? Because this is circular bracket. I'm calling constructor. Here it is not circular bracket. I'm creating array. Okay. So over here, I'm going to create, I'm saying this is pointing to an object which is created here, date object. So the objects are created in heap, right? So what is the day, month? 2/3/2020. So this will become 2/3/2020, day, month, and year. Okay, DMY. And in this case, suppose our address location is 200, where this particular object is being stored. So over here, you will get the value as 200. Right? Now over here, let's see. We are having 3/4/2020, another object. How do I know it is another object? Because again, new keyword is being used. So it's another object. So over here, I'm going to have another object that is being created. Say it is in 400 location. Okay. So this is D, M, and Y. What is the value? 3, 4, and 2020. So 3, 4, and 2020. So say this one's address location is 400. So over here, I'm getting 400. Now see, the next line, I'm printing out DARR of zeros, and then I'm calling the toString for that. So it is going to display the values, day, month, and year, toString method, which is there in date class. So if you remember yesterday, we saw this toString method is returning a string value. that string value is going to be concatenated here along with this date before. Okay, so we are going to see that over here, toString of DARR of 0th location. This one's toString will be called, that in this day, month and year will be printed. If I call DARR of 1, then this one's toString method will be called, and 3, 4 and 2020 will be printed. So we got that before swapping. Now we are calling the swap method. So in the swap method, what did you pass? You pass the array. Okay. So when I'm saying this particular variable, is it a local variable? Yes, because its data type is right next to it. But it's local to which method? It's local to swap method. So swap method is a method that is called directly by the main method. So what should I have? I should have a stack frame. So I will have a stack frame which is there just for swap. Over here, this is my swap stack frame. Okay, and inside that I'm going to have DARR, which happens to be a local variable for swap, right? And in that DARR, what will be the value? The previous DRR, whatever value is passed over there, that value this variable will get. So in this case, what is the value? 100. Okay. Now, is there any other local variable? Yes, temp is also a local variable. Okay, so we have temp. Initial value is null because it's of class type. Okay. Now see this DARR of 0. I'm putting it inside temp. DARR of 0. So let's see. This is now pointing to this array, same as this 100, right? DARR of 0th location, that is this. Okay, wow, what is the value? 200. I'm going to put it in temp, so this will become 200. Second line, DARR of 1, I'm putting in DARR of 0. So DARR of 1, what is it? 400. I'm putting it in DARR of 0 here. Okay, so this 200 will be replaced by 400. Then again, temp I'm putting in DARR of 1. So what is temp value? 200. I'm putting that in DARR of 1 over here. So this will become 200. So now this is pointing to this and this is pointing to this. Right? Now, end of swap method. So when swap method gets over, what happens? The stack gets popped. Right? So if the stack gets popped, what happens? The memory of swapping, is it lost or not lost? It is definitely not lost, because where is the memory of swapping? It is inside heap. Okay, because arrays are created automatically, its memory is created inside heap. Last time pass by value, what did we do? We made the swapping happen in the stack, so that memory got lost when the stack got popped. But this time what are we going to do? We're going to do the memory of swapping within the heap. So in that case, even if I pop out this stack, my heap, that memory of swapping is still there. So if I go back, I pop the swap. If I go back, I'm still talking about the main stacks D1, D1 and D2. That is DRR of 0 and DRR of 1. So mains DRR of 0, I'm going to print it. So this one. So what is this one's value? This one's value is 400. So it's going to print 3/4/2020 first. And then DRR of 1. That is this DRR of 1. That is going to print 200. So in that case, it will be 2/3/2020. And you get your values as swapped. Okay, because this time the memory of swapping is where? Inside the heap. That is why the swap does work. Okay, but some people might ask that even without doing an array, can I swap it? Yes, you can. Okay, but that is going to be a tedious affair. How do I do that? Okay, suppose imagine this particular array did not exist. Okay, imagine this particular array did not exist, and we had our normal D1 and D2 that is being pushed into the stack, just like pass by value. Okay, so we have D1 and D2. D1 is pointing to this object. D2 is pointing to this object. That's all we have. We don't have the array. Okay. So why can't I go inside the object and try to replace the values? This 2 I will change to 3. This 3 I will change to 2. I'm going inside the object. Right. So how do I change that? How do I get values that is stored inside the object? Any idea? How do I get values that is stored inside the object? Okay, you can type it in chat. Yes, very good. From the getter, very good, Apeksha, very good, right? From the getter. So that means if I use the dot operator, I can access values that are there inside this particular object. So I will write D1 dot. First, I want to get this value, right? I want to take this value and store it in this. So d1 dot get day, right? I will get the value. Then you can use the what d2 dot get day, and then you can use the d1 dot set day to set this particular value. Understanding? So you can use this, but tell me, for this also I need a temporary variable, and to swap also I need two statements. That means just to swap day I need how many statements? 3. Now similarly I need to follow for month. For that, how many statements I need? Another 3. And then for year, another 3, right? So just for, even though I have only 3 variables, I need a total of 9 statements to do that particular swap if I'm going inside the object and swapping the values. But imagine if you had like an employee object or something like that, wherein there are so many variables. You can't be going on and individually swapping each and every value that is there inside the object. Instead of that, you just swap the addresses. And to store the addresses, we are creating array, because arrays are created in the heap anyway, right? So this is a more convenient way of doing pass by reference. Okay, but when in somebody asks you in the interview, is there pass by reference in Java? The answer is no. Okay, the answer is no. You do not tell it as pass by reference. Okay, why you do not tell it? Because pass by reference is passing nothing but the reference variable, right? Reference variable, and the reference variable even though it contains address, the address also happens to be a hexadecimal value. Are you understanding? So that is also value. Over here, if you see, DARR's value is what? 100. That 100 is what is being copied into this particular local variable which is there. So it is also a copy. Are you understanding? Okay, so you're not passing any you're passing the reference, but the reference also happens to be what? A hexadecimal value. So that is why in Java you do not say it as pass by value. You always say it as you do not say it as pass by reference. You always say it as pass by value. It is the value which happens to be the address that is being passed to the local variable. Okay. So if asked in the interview, always say that Java always supports pass by value. Okay. Even though some people call this concept of using an array to swap and all as pass by reference, but it's not reference. Okay. It is actually a hexadecimal value that is being copied into this. Okay. For the sake of simplicity, that's why I've used integers. Okay. Right. So we have the pass by reference. Okay. So now we'll see, we have our date class. Okay. Now I'm going to create another. So you see, this is the date class which has day, month, and year, getters and setters, and the toString method. Okay. So it has these many options. Now we are going to see, right click, new. Okay. I'm going to create a class, and I'm going to check the equality of these objects. Okay. So I'll write it as client code because here I need a main method. Okay. So I told you any class that has a main method in it so that I can start running it is what you call it as client code, or you call it as tester. Okay. So we're going to write here. Fine. Now see this. MAIN control space, the main method, and I'm going to create the date class. Okay. So I'm going to create a date object d1 equal to new date. Okay. I'm going to pass some sort of date 1 to 2020. Then I'm writing date d2 equal to new date. And then I'm going to pass 1 to 2020. Okay. Means I'm writing the same date. Okay. And now I'm writing if d1 equal to d2. I'm checking d1 equal to d2. Okay. And then I'm writing sysout. So you remember the shortcut for writing system.out.println is sysout control space. Okay. Over here I'm writing dates are equal. And in else part, I'm writing dates are not equal. Okay. Now tell me. Now tell me, what will be the output of this program? What will be the output of this program? Okay. You can type it in chat. Draco is telling dates are equal. Vishaka bol rahi equals. Yogeshwari not equal. Himani equal. Okay. The answer will be dates are not equal. Okay. But why? Okay. So as usual, you can clearly understand from the memory diagram that what exactly happens. Okay? Clearly understand from the memory diagram. Okay. So first what happens? Objects are created inside heap. So I'm having two objects that is there inside the heap. Right. So the first one will be there inside the heap. What is the value of the dates? 1 to 2020. So 1 to 2020. Okay. So this will be day, month, and then year. Okay. What about the next one? So you see this is local variable, because its data type is next to it, and it is the data type happens to be within the method. So I'll have main method. A main method will have a stack of its own. So here is my main method. Inside that I'm pushing D1. Right? So D1 is going to point to what? The first object. So it is going to point to the address. Okay, pointing with the, suppose this is stored at 100 location. This is going to become 100. Okay? Now the next line, what happens? It's a completely different object. See, again new operator is being created. Right? So another data object will be created wherein D1, D month and year is also happens to be 1, 2 and 2020. The value inside the object is correct, but what is the address? Do you think that it will address will be same? It will be completely different. So if I'm having D2, what happens? It will store like this. Okay. So because of that, you can clearly understand what is the value that is there in D1, 100. What is the value that is there in D2, 200? Are they equal? No. Okay. So primitive equals, that is these two equals, are going to check the value. That is D1's value and D2's value. And D1 and D2's value, one is 100 and one is 200. So obviously you're going to get a true here. And when you get a true, you're going to print out dates. Sorry, in this case, it is not same because both are different objects. So it is going to give you false. So if you false, then it will go to else part and it's going to print out dates are not equal. So let's see that. Right click, run as Java application. What is happening? Dates are not equal. You understanding? Because both are different objects, their memory addresses are different, and D1 and D2 is actually holding the memory address, though you cannot see the value. Okay, why am I telling you cannot see the value? That is a completely, it will take me 1 hour to explain to you that. Okay, D1, I'm trying to print out D1, the value in D1. Okay, so if I print out, I'm going to get, I'm not going to get the actual address, right? Because I have used toString method is being invoked automatically. Yes, you want to try it out, Ankit? Sure. I'll copy and paste this inside the chat box. Some of you want to try it out. Okay, you can try it out. So see, imagine if I had not written that toString. Okay, if I had not written this toString, if I had not written this toString, and then I'm trying to print out that D1. Okay, print out that D1. Okay, automatically that method called toString will be called. Okay, so why that toString method will be called automatically is because there is always an implicit call whenever you try to print out reference variable. There is an implicit call to toString method. So if you see over here, it is coming from which class? Object class, which happens to be parent class for all classes in Java. So it is taking from that object class, the toString method. Okay, I don't have to write it, but it takes. Okay, and we are going to see the result of the toString method that is given in the object class. What is it given? Some sort of value. So this is actually the fully qualified name of the class, followed by @ followed by what is known as hash code value. Okay, hash code value is not the address. It may look like the address, it is not the address. Okay, so that we'll see some other time, but that you have to go in detail to explain toString itself. It will take me 1.5 hours. Okay, so we'll not go into that because it's not in the scope of this webinar. Okay, fine. So that's why I'm telling D1 actually contains the address, but when we print it, we never get the address. Okay, it is for internal use. That's what he's telling. Just like a reference book you can use, you cannot scribble or you cannot view anything in that like that. Okay, so in this case, so dates are not equal is what you get because the addresses are completely different. Now, this time what am I going to do? Instead of double equals to, I'm going to call a method, okay, which is known as equals method. So if you see clearly, the dot equals, okay, dot equals I'm calling. Where does this dot equals method come from? Which class? You can see clearly here, it is coming from which class? Object class, okay. Object class happens to be the parent class of all classes in Java, okay. I'll show you that, okay. Over here, we are having equals, on equals I'm calling, okay. So even if you do not see it here, even if you do not see it here, there is actually, so not going into detail of inheritance, but there is actually a parent class for this, and that class is called as object class, okay. So even if you do not see this line here, there is an extension that is happening. So whatever is in your parent, that automatically you get down through inheritance, okay. So there is a method called as equals which is there in the parent that you're getting down through inheritance. So date can use that particular method also, okay. So over here, if you see over here, I'm going to use the equals method. Now can you tell me what will come the output? Will it be dates are equal or dates are not equal? Will it be dates are equal? Dates are equal, yes. Equals, everybody's telling equals. Equals, okay. Okay, so let me run and show you. The output will be not predictable. What is going to come? Dates are not equal. But the question is why? Okay, because you all said it is going to be equal, right? There should be some difference. Yes. The question is why? See, if you see clearly, the equals method that is coming from object class, if you see clearly its documentation, you can just go browse the documentation. That time you can see clearly that what is it actually? It's a double equals. It's the same as primitive equals. If you want, you can right click. There's an option called as open declaration, okay. You will actually go to that particular method, and inside that, if you see, it is actually what? Same as double equals. The value that is being passed through equals, which is d2, and the one who called equals, which is d1. The one who called equals will be there in this operator, and the value that is being passed. So it is actually a double equals that is there inside the object class equals method, and that is why you're still getting the same output as your double equals. You understanding? Because the equals method which is coming from object class is exactly same as the primitive double equals, and that is why you're getting dates are not equal, because it's comparing the address of value of d1 and the value of d2, and both the values are completely different, so you're going to get dates are not equal, okay. But is this your expected output? No, you want such that you want to compare the content of this date object and the content of this particular object, and those contents should be equal or not. That is what we want to test, okay. So what happens whenever parent has given you a method? Whenever parent has given you a method and you're not happy with that particular method, like in this case, I'm not happy, I don't want this implementation, okay, I wanted to check the actual content, right? So what do? Some of you, I'm not expecting all of you to know, because for this you need to know a little bit of what you call CPP programming, at least you should have known, okay. I'm not expecting everyone to know. Can you tell me, if parent is giving you a particular method, then you're not happy with that particular method, so what do? Yes, Devyani is correct. Yes. Anybody else? Tejas, very good. Override. Okay, so that means I have to override that particular method. So it's like normal relationship that exists in the real world. Parent is giving you something out of inheritance, but suppose you say you don't want that. Okay, so what you'll do? You'll override that particular implementation. Same way we are going to override. Okay, so we're going to override the equals method because this is not the equals that I want. Okay, so inheritance is a forced relationship. You cannot tell your parent, don't give me something. Understand it? If you got your complexion of your parent, you cannot tell your parent, don't give me, right? That comes down to inheritance. It's a forceful relationship, but there is an option to override it, okay. So for that you're going to override, okay. So inside date class, how do I know I have to go to inside date class? Because equals is being called by d1. D1 is of what type? Date type. So in date class is where you need to override, right? So inside date class, I'm going to override the equals method, okay. Over here, I'm going to override the equals method. So there are certain rules of overriding. Okay, so we're not learning method overriding right now, but I'll just tell you the rules. One rule is the name should be same, the argument should be same. Okay, the return type should be same, but there is an exception which is known as covariant return type. So that we'll see some other time. So let me repeat. The name of the method should be same. So what is the name of the method? Equals. Okay? The argument should be same. What is the argument? It is going to, it can equate any object now, right? Yes, they just only functional type. So it can take compare any type of object. So the argument is object type. Okay, and then return type should be what? Same, or there is another thing which is known as covariant return type that we will not discuss now. So there is known as boolean. Okay, it is checking whether the two values are equal. If yes, then I'll give true. If not, I'll give back false. Okay, and what about the access specifier? Whenever you're overriding a particular method, the access specifier has to be same or greater. It cannot be lesser. Okay, access specifier, like this public, private, and protected and all that, those are known as access specifier. It has to be same or greater. It cannot be lesser. So in this case, in Java, if I do not write any access specifier here, the default access specifier is called as default. Okay, so there is no keyword called as default like this. You do not write it like that. The lack of access specifier is what is called as default in Java. Okay, not writing anything is what is called as default. So I did not write anything. So what is access specifier here currently? It is default. The default access specifier means same package you can use, different package you cannot use. Okay, so it is having lesser access compared to public. And can you tell me what about the equals method which was there inside the object class? It was the public access specifier. Understanding? So public, there is nothing greater than public. So you cannot, you have to make this particular method also as public. Because what is the rules of overriding? The access specifier can be same or greater. Okay. So in this case, greater than public, there is nothing. So you have to write here public. Otherwise, it will be decreased access specifier. Okay. So it will not be a valid override otherwise. Okay. So over here, I'm writing equals. So I will just return true. Okay. So then the error will go. Okay. Now see, now what do I want to do? In equals, what do I want to check? Okay, I want to check if the day is equal to the other one's day, months are equal, year is equal. I want to actually check the content. Okay, now I'm going to do that. Okay, so for that, okay, so for that, I'm going to check. What should I do? Okay, now you see, this is a reference variable, local reference variable, pointing to which class? Pointing to which class? You see what is being passed over here? The parameter that is being passed is d2, right? D2 is being passed through the method, right? So it's kind of like telling, you're writing like this. Object O is equal to new date. This is the D2 one's date, okay? And then 1/2/2020. You're writing like this, okay? So whenever you are having parent reference variable, you can point to any type of its in child also, okay? You can write is equal to new object, or you can write to new date also, okay? So over here, it's like in O, you can either store object or a subclass of object, and date happens to be a subclass of object, so I can definitely store it. Okay, now see this O dot. If you write O dot, then in that case, what happens? You're calling the, you can only call the methods that is there in the left hand side. Okay, so whatever method you see, so we are not discussing method overriding and all in detail, but I'll just show you that in O, using O, you can only call the methods that are available on the left hand side. Okay, if I write a particular method that is there in date but not there in object, then what happens? I'll get a compile time error. Okay, so whatever method that is there has to be in this. Okay, that is known as, if there is a table which is known as compiler table that is maintained by the compiler, it will check inside the table, is such a method there in my left hand side? If it is there, then I will let you call it. If it is not there, I'll directly give you compile time error. Okay, so using O, you can only call methods that are there in which class? Object class. You cannot call methods that is there in date class. Cannot call methods that is there in date class. But inside this equals, if you see, what do I want to compare? Inside this equals, if you see, what do I want to compare? I want to get the day, month, and year. so that I can compare the day, month, and year. Are you understanding? So to get day, month, and year, those variables are there in which class? Date class. They are not there in object class. You understanding? Those variables, day, month, and year, are in date class. They are not there in object class. So we need to get that particular value. So over here, how do I get that particular value? Okay. So what am I going to do? I'm going to use a concept which is known as downcasting. This O, I'm going to downcast it to of type date. Okay. The parent type, the reason why this is giving me compile time error is because this particular method was not there in object class. But now what am I going to do? I'm going to use a concept which is known as downcasting, so that I can convert this object from parent time to child type. Okay. Now if I call the particular method which is there inside date class, I can definitely call it. Okay. So that's what I'm going to do right now. Over here, I'm going to downcast O. Okay. So if I downcast O to a type of date, if I downcast O to a type of date, what will I get? Date D2. This is my past date. Okay, this is my past date. Now, what am I going to do? If, how do I get D1's value? How do I get D1's date? D2 I got, the past value I got. What about D1? How will I get D1? Any idea? How do I get D1? Yes, Devyani is correct, by using this. Okay, so what happens is that whenever I'm having over here, equals is being called by who? D1, right? So this is a hidden reference variable that points to the current object. Whoever calls equals, that, who is that object? This object. That object, on top of that object, there is also a hidden reference variable that is pointing to other than D1, which is called as this operator. Okay, we're not going into the details of that. Okay, Gaurav is asking, is it possible to access methods of date class using scope resolution operator? Gaurav, that is happening in C++. Scope resolution operator use करके access कर. ठीक है, not in Java. That is not a syntax here. Fine. Over here, we are using, so if I use this, I will get D1. Okay, this day I'm checking with equal to equal. I'm checking the actual value with who? D2's value. Dot date. Okay, fine. So I got the first day I'm comparing, and so it's not just day. I should have month also same na. This dot month equal to D2 dot month. Okay, and this dot year equal to D2 dot year. Okay, now if all of them are same, then what can I return? Return the actual content is now same. I will return true. Else I will return what? False. Is this okay for you? Right? So now when I run my program, which equals will be called? Will it take the equals which is there in object class, or will it take the equals which I have overridden in my date class? Right? So if you go right now and see this thing, before it was showing equals which is coming from object class. Now what is it showing? It is showing equals which is coming from date class. Okay, because I have overridden that particular method coming from the object class. So now if I run, it is going to take the equals which I have written, and it is actually going to check the content, and this time it gives what? Dates are equal. So equality of objects. So when in the interview, if is asked, explain the difference between primitive equals and equals method, right? So primitive equals will work both on, what do you call, primitives, that is 1 equal to 2. Okay, it will work on primitives as well as it will work on reference variables like D1 equal to D2, which we just tried. Understand it? So primitive equals works on primitives as well as reference variables. But since this is a method, you need to call it by using reference variable only, because a method exists within a class, right? So for that, you need to have called within reference. You cannot use equals for primitives. 1 equal to 2, you cannot try. Okay, so it has to be comparing of reference variable. Then you should also mention specifically there are two types, right? If I do not override equals, it is going to take the equals which is there of object class, and object class equals is same as primitive equals. But if I do override equals, then in that case it is going to compare the content. Okay, and on that basis it's going to compare the content of the object that is being compared. Right? Now, is this how generally equals method is written? Is this how generally equals method is written? The answer is no. Okay, so the method that I have written is a bare minimum method. Okay, this is for commenting. Commenting you write for /star. Okay, now the method that I wrote is a bare minimum and simple equals method, but that is not the equals method which generally in industry you use. Okay, so how do you write that equals method? So you just right click. The equals method is so frequently used that it can be auto generated by Eclipse. Okay, so right click, source. There is an option here to generate hash code and equals. Okay, so generate hash code and equals. Okay, there is a reason why it is not giving me specifically only equals. It's giving me both hash code as well as equals. Okay, there's a reason why. Okay, because there's a contract between them. That's why. Okay, so we'll just see the equals part. Hash code part, since we're not discussing that, we'll not cover. But it is not address. Okay, and because there's a contract between equals and hash code, that is why the override is happening same time. So we will discuss this on that current basis. Okay, so let's discuss this. Why is it giving me in like this kind of cumbersome way? Why not me write a simple equals method that is like this? Okay, that is the question. Okay, so if you see, let me just open object class and I'll just search for something. Okay, Control F. Okay, see this particular documentation that is given over here. Okay, there is a person called as Joshua Block. Joshua Block. Okay, he has written a book, and that book's name is called as Effective Java. Effective Java. Okay, so the Effective Java book is, he is one of the people who have written the actual JVM. Right. So as per his recommendation, it is told that you do not program as such. You program effectively, keeping in mind the performance of your application. Right, so each small code that you write should be written effectively. That is his approach. Right, so as per his approach, most IDEs have followed that particular approach in order to generate the auto generated equals method. Right, so let us see what is his approach. That is the approach that is followed by almost all IDEs. Right, so let us see what is his approach. He says that I have, so can you tell me, I'll just write here itself. So tell me, what is the past value? This is D2. Okay. The past value is D2. Now, who called equals? D1. D1 called equals. D1 is the calling method. So the object that is pointed to by D1 is the same one that who is pointing this also. This operator points to the current object. Current object is the invoking object is the current object. Okay. Who invoked equals? D1. So this points to D1 itself. Whatever D1 points to, this also points to that. Okay. Now see this. If this equal to obj, that means I'm checking if this, that is D1, is equal to D2, that is the primitive equals it is checking. Okay, so it is checking like this. If I'm having date D1 equal to new date, okay, and over here I'm writing 1/2/2020. Okay, and in the second line I'm just creating a reference variable date D2, which is pointing to D1 itself. That means D1's value I'm putting inside D2. So in memory, what is happening? How many objects are there? How many times new operator is there? Only one time. So in memory, there is only one single object to which both D1 as well as D2 is pointing to. You understanding? D1 as well as D2 are both pointing to the exact same object. So if you're pointing to the exact same object, why do I need to use dot operator? Get the day, month, and year, and again get the day, month, and year compare. They are both pointing to the same object. Why should I go ahead inside the object and compare the day, month, and year? That decreases my performance. I'm understanding. So it's telling if the program is written like this, such that D1 and D2 are pointing to the exact same object, then what do I give? Directly return back true. I don't need to go inside the object and find out day, month, or year are equal. Because obviously they will be same. Because D1 and D2 are pointing to the same object. So directly I'm telling return back true. Don't check further. So it improves the performance. You understanding? Right? So writing like this improves the performance. Now see this. The second cases. If I'm coming over here, it would have returned. Okay, it's coming over here, it means that they are not pointing to the same object. So I'll just delete this. Okay, this is not coming from the same object. Okay, so this is my D2, this is my D1, and D1 is what this is also pointing to. Okay, now let's see the next case. If obj equal to none. Okay, so you see one of them is actually pointing, D1 is actually pointing to an actual object, and D2 value I've given it as null value. Okay, for some reason I have no idea. For the current time, D2 is given as null value. Okay, can you compare null with any other object? Comparison with null is not an option, right? So whenever an D2 is given as null, you directly return back they are not same. Okay, you do not have to go inside get the D's value and try to compare with null. Comparing with null anyway will give you null pointer exception. I understand it. So you directly give back false. So this also improves the performance. Question here is, why did you check for whether obj is null? Why didn't I check whether D1 is null? Any idea? See, the past value I checked whether it is null or not. What about the D1, which called the equals method? Why didn't I check whether D1 is null or not? Any idea? Mm-hmm. Yes, yes, D1 is right. We called, yes, D1 is current, right? So what happens is that you called, using D1, you called equals, right? If imagine D1 happened to be null, directly any operation that is done on null value, be it calling a method equals or being calling the length or anything that is done on null value, directly आपको क्या आएगा? Null pointer exception आएगा. Understanding? You will directly get a null pointer exception in case you perform any operation on null. So in this case, if you have reached till this line, then obviously null pointer exception didn't come, right? Can you understanding? Because you reach this line, you are checking for only the second one. Why? Because there is no chance that D1 can become null. Otherwise, I wouldn't have entered this method in the first place. Okay, I would have directly got a null pointer exception then and there. Okay, so I am sure that D1 is anyway not null. I'm not sure whether D2 is null. So I'm going to just check for D2. Okay, so if D2 is null, I'm going to return back false. Fine. This is one. Now let's see the next line. So to understand next line, it might be a little, what you call, I have to tell you again the JVM's memory architecture for that. But for that, that's an entire chapter of its own. Okay, but I'll just tell you, try to explain to you in a simple words, what exactly does it mean. Okay, see this. If I write get class and I'm writing obj.get class. So get class is actually calling an instance method directly. So what happens over here? It is actually this dot get class, okay? This dot get class and obj dot get class. Okay. Now I'm checking. See, if you are an apple, if you are an apple object, okay, and you are an orange object, okay, I'm just taking some fruits, okay, apple and orange, okay. So in that case, what happens? So there is something called as reflection API, which is created, an object that is created in the heap, which is used to get the details about the class that you have written, apple class details to get. So that is an entire chapter of its own. I'm not going to get too much into detail, okay. So there is an entire reflection that is created. So what it is checking is comparing the reflection. If the reflection of apple and the reflection of orange are not equal, okay, not equal, in that case, what is it telling? You cannot compare apples with oranges. You can compare apple with what? Another apple object. Understanding? How can you compare apple with oranges? That's why it's telling that if in case their reflections are not equal, okay, then directly return back false because you can't even compare them. Okay, that's what it's told. So get class is a method that is there in object class, which is used to give you back a reference to the class called class ka object. So in Java, there is a class whose name itself is called as class. Okay, it is used to find information regarding classes. What are the variables, what are the methods, what are the constructors, all that information to find that. Okay, so such an object is directly created inside the heap space when you load this apple inside the method area. Okay, So I'm not going to go much into the memory details. We have an entire chapter on JVM architecture. That's why, okay. So we are not going to go much into detail. Just try to understand. So if the two objects are having the reflections as completely reflection, I mean you can consider the literal reflection which is you are having in a mirror. Okay. So if their reflections are completely not alike, it means you're trying to compare apples with oranges, which is not allowed, right? So obviously you're going to return back false. Okay. Now after that is the point where, okay, after that is the point where we come in the picture. You remember the date object that we recreated here? Same thing, downcasting, comparing day, month, and year, right? This is the same thing. So that's what I'm doing over here. Downcasting the OBJ. So I get other. Other in this case is depicting what? D2. Okay, this is depicting D2. Now Joshua Block is even more, what do you call, in depth. He has done the performance. See what he has done. He's telling that if the days are not the same, that means 1 to 2020, okay, and this is 2 to 2020. If the days are not same, this one's day and this one's day are not same, then why are you going ahead and comparing month and year? Anyway, the objects are not same. Are you understanding? So it improves the performance. If these two are not same, directly return what? False. Okay. Now suppose if day and day are same, this is 1 and 1, but this is 2 and 3. Okay. Then in that case, I need to go and check month. Okay. And month also not same, then what will I return back? False. Okay. So it improves the performance. So it's going and checking day, then month, then year. Now imagine it, all of them are equal. It is 1 to 2020. Here also it is 1 to 2020. All of them are equal. Then in that case, what will I do? Finally, I will return back true. Understanding? All these cases, I will return back what? False. It improves my performance. Okay. In this case, if both the references are pointing to the same object, don't even compare. Directly return back true. That also improves the performance. So you understand the equals method that is given by Eclipse is following the recommendation that is mentioned by Joshua Block. Okay. This is one of the beautiful codes that is written in Java. Okay. So are you understanding equality of objects? Yes or no? If you understood, please here type yes. Okay, okay. Now see. Okay, very good. Now we'll just see, go ahead and we'll consider the next topic, which is known as abstraction. Abstract class. Okay. So for abstract class, okay. So if those of you who do not know its concept and all might find it a little confusing right now. Okay. But we'll try to get a little clarity. I'll take simple examples. Okay. Um, okay. Now see here. I'm having a class, say I'm having a class called as phone. Okay. So inside this phone, okay, I want some sort of functionality. Okay. So I'm going to create some sort of functionality. Say I want to have calling. Okay. So I provide the implementation for calling. Right? So there is some sort of implementation. But imagine there is some functionality of phone which I wish I had, but I just don't know how to implement it. That means it's just an illusion or a hypothesis. Okay. So I don't know how to implement it, but I just know that it should have this functionality. Okay. Okay. So I will call that particular method phone cooking. Okay. My phone should be able to cook. Okay. So obviously I don't know how exactly it should do it. Okay. I just know that it should be there. Okay. So what do? I cannot provide implementation because I don't know how to do it. So what will I do? I'll just put the semicolon at the end. This type of method is known as method definition, wherein I'm actually providing the definition of the method. Okay. This is known as method definition. Okay. In this case, what is it? It is only method declaration. Okay. I'm only declaring the method with a semicolon at the end. Right. So we have method definition and we have method declaration. Right. Now see this. A method that is only declared like this, okay, and not defined. Such a method, we call it as abstract method. Okay, so you have to write the keyword here called as abstract. Okay, let me repeat. A method that is only declared and not defined like this. Such a method, we call it as an abstract method. Abstract, you know, word meaning of abstract in English means what? An illusion, a hypothesis. Okay, it does not exist in real life. That's the meaning. Okay, so it's just an abstract picture, you know, right? Abstract pictures, it's like a design picture which nobody understands. That's it. Okay, so in this case I just know it should be there, but I really don't know how to do it, right? So I write this particular method as an abstract method. So what is an abstract method? It is a method that is only declared and not defined. Such a method, you call it as abstract method. Fine. Now a class, this is a class that has at least one. So in this case there is one, right? Class that has at least one abstract method, at least one abstract method. Such a class should be an abstract class. Okay, I am telling it should be. There is no other option. Okay, so if I am having a particular method, if it is declared only, then I will call that particular method as abstract. A class that has at least one abstract method, such a class will be called as what? An abstract class. Okay, so why am I making this particular class as abstract? For an abstract class, you can never create an object. Using new operator, you cannot create object. If you write your new phone calling the constructor, it will give you an error. Okay, abstract class you cannot give create object. But why? Like for example, if you are having a phone and you tell I have given this what do you call 1 TB RAM and all. Okay, so it's just your hypothesis. You will have never implemented it. Okay, but still you're selling that particular phone in the market. Is that possible? In specifications, you have specified so many things, but when you sell it in the market, there is no feature. Understanding? So because of that, it's told that you cannot create an object of abstract class. Why? For the sole purpose that I should not be calling such methods. Using dot operator, I can call calling because there is implementation. What about this abstract method? There is no implementation for it, right? So abstract class, if you have an abstract method, then your class should be what? Abstract. And for an abstract method, you cannot create object. Now the question is, then why use this abstract class if you cannot create object? Okay, then how do I invoke anything inside this? Okay, so you see, in previous times you see IEEE papers and all are there. Okay, so in 1960s and all, suppose somebody has written an IEEE paper wherein he has stated some sort of hypothesis, a design, some sort of design. On basis of hypothesis also you can publish papers. Okay, so you have specified a particular design. So design means that person never knew how to do it. Okay, suppose steam engine ka design he has told, but he does not know how to do it, right? So in this case what happens? Suppose the next generation person will do what? Will extend his research further. Okay, so will extend his research further. So he will refer this. Okay, he will tell on the basis of this documentation, I'm extending the research further because I know how to do the implementation. Okay, I know how to do the implementation, so I will extend his research further. So maybe the next generation knows. So an abstract class, you cannot create object, but you can definitely extend an abstract class. Extend means further next generation can get that details. So I will have a class. Suppose I'm calling it a smartphone. Okay, so the smartphone is now the child. Okay, so that's going to tell I'm going to extend the phone. Extend the phone, and inside that I'm telling that whatever is the parent is having, obviously I will get it down through inheritance. That is known as easier relationship. Okay, this is known as easier relationship. Smartphone is a phone, so whatever phone features is there, that automatically smartphone will get. I do not have to redo writing this calling. So inheritance has what? Two features. What is the two features? It is reusability of the existing code. Okay, and plus it has extensibility. Extensibility. So reusing this code plus this one, this abstract method that is there over here, I have to provide the implementation for this. Why I have to provide implementation for this, we will see. Okay, so calling method I don't have to write again, not an issue because it comes down through inheritance automatically. It is my method also. What about this abstract method? So if smartphone, which is the next generation, knows how to implement cooking in a phone, then you can go ahead and implement cook. If it knows, okay? So it is knowing how to do, then I will write the implementation. Okay? Then you can create object of this particular class and call the cook method, or you can call the calling method also, because it comes down through inheritance. Okay? You can do that. There is no problem. But what if you do not know? Okay, what if you also don't know how to cook? Why you extended then? You extended so that you can get the calling functionality. Okay, so you extended so that you can get the calling functionality, but you still don't know how to do the cook implementation. So what will happen? You have to write the signature here, cook. Okay, I also don't know, so I will declare the method. Okay, and a method that is only declared and not defined will be what? An abstract method. And a class that is having at least one abstract method. In this case, there is one, right? So such a class will become what? Abstract class. Okay, for which I cannot create the object. Okay, so sometimes people are asking me, ma'am, till when this will go? This will go on until and unless you get a class who actually does know how to implement cook, or who's actually such a class you call as a concrete class. Okay, now I have one question. Okay, the question is, what did I say? That if a class has at least one abstract method, if a class has at least one abstract method, then my class will be what? Should be an abstract class. That's what I mentioned. What if I told you the other way around? If a class is called abstract, is made abstract, does it mean that there should be an abstract method inside the class? I'll repeat the question. There is a single abstract method. If a class has a single abstract method, one or more abstract method, then my class should be abstract. But is it true that if there is an abstract class, then there should be an abstract method in it? True or false? Pranani is telling no. Echo is telling no. False. Tejas is telling true. Okay, so I'll tell you. Okay? See, just because I tell you that I like you, does it mean that you should like me? If I tell you that I like you, does it mean that you should like me? There is no compulsion at all. And you understand the same way. If I'm saying that there is an abstract method here, okay, then it is compulsory that the class should be abstract. That is true. But if you make a class that abstract, then there is no compulsion that your class should be abstract, having an abstract method. Okay, so some of you might get confused over here. So we'll just consider that. Okay, so see, when exactly does that scenario happen? Suppose, okay, suppose it's like this. I've created an abstract class. Okay, I'm writing it as abstract itself, class. Okay, let's see, student. I made an abstract class called as student. Okay, so inside that student class, I'm having say attendance calculations. There is a method for attendance calculation. Okay, then student is attendance calculation, and plus some other thing, like for example, what else can a student have? Okay, study. Okay. Okay. So I'll have a study. Remember. Yes, I'm just talking about functionality because we are talking about abstract methods. There is no abstract variable. Okay, so we're talking about abstract method. That's why. Okay, so I'm not mentioning about roll number. Okay, now yes, Tejas is correct. Then what is the use to declare it as abstract? So that's the question we want to solve. Okay. Now see, I made a particular class as abstract. Okay. Now you see all the methods are implemented. Attendance is implemented, even study is implemented. Okay. So you are the student. Okay. You are the student who made this particular class, and you told attendance ka implementation I did, and study implementation also I did. Okay. But since you are the person who made this class, you also know what if I give here as blank implementation? That is also body, right? That is also definition, right? So even if I give blank, still it is considered as what? Method is defined, right? Even if I suppose I wrote some sort of partial, understanding. So you're telling you studied, but you really didn't study anything. Okay. So over here, what happens is that you're doing some sort of partial implementation, but you know that implementation that you have written is partial or it is incomplete in some way. Okay. So you might be doing some sort of trial and error, like cooking. I don't know how to implement it, but let me try some logic for it. Understanding. So whatever implementation that you have done, because you wrote this class, you definitely know that this is a partial implementation or the implementation is incomplete or it is just a blank implementation, that you know, right? So if this is a blank implementation or it is the wrong implementation and that you don't want anybody calling this particular method. Are you understanding? You don't want anybody calling this particular method. And how is that possible? Make the classes abstract. So if you make the classes abstract, what happens? You cannot create object. And if anybody cannot create object, how will they be able to call the study method? You understanding? So there are certain scenarios wherein the class is abstract, but there is not a single abstract method inside that class. There could be, okay. So but there is no compulsion. Okay. So if I say there is an abstract method in my class, then it is compulsory that my class should be abstract. But if I say my class is abstract, then there is no compulsion that there should be an abstract method in my class, because the person who wrote the implementation knows whether it is partial, whether it is incomplete, or whether it is blank implementation. That the person who knows that wrote the class will definitely know. So he or she will definitely make that particular class as abstract, so that nobody can create an object of this particular class and call this particular implementation. Are you understanding? So it is not like necessary. The other way around, there is no necessity for that. Okay. Now, let us try one example for this. Okay. So today's date. Yes, Rishikesh, I'll tell you what exactly is concrete class. Okay, I'll just tell you now. Okay, that's a good question. I just left it out. Okay. Okay. So somebody asked me what exactly is concrete class. So since it's relevant to this topic, I'll definitely discuss. Okay. So as you see, if I'm right, you remember we wrote that smartphone class which extends phone, right? Extends phone. Okay. Any class for which you can create object, any class for which you can create object is directly called as a concrete class. Understanding? So if that means you do not have abstract keyword here. Any class for which you can definitely create an object is what is known as a concrete class. Okay. So concrete class, if you have a concrete class and you are extending from abstract class, if you have decided for sure I have to create an object of this class, that you have already decided, okay, and you are extending from an abstract class, okay, then it is compulsory that you provide the implementation for all the abstract methods that is coming down through inheritance. So you have to provide the implementation for hook. You understanding? If you are writing that you are so sure that my smartphone, I am going to release it in the market for sure. Okay, that means I'm going to create an object in heap for sure. Such a class is what is known as concrete class. Then in that case, what happens? It has to provide the implementation for all the abstract methods that is coming down through inheritance. It has to provide the implementation for this. Okay, but some people say that definition of concrete class as a class in which all the methods are implemented. Some people say concrete class is a class in which all the methods are implemented. Is that definition correct? Is that definition correct? Concrete class is a class in which all the methods are implemented. Is that correct? Disha is telling no. Abhijit, no. Yes, very good. Because we clearly saw that even if we write an abstract class, like in this case, we wrote student. In this case, we wrote, remember, we just wrote student. Inside that, we wrote get attendance. That is also implemented. We wrote, what do you call, study. That was also implemented, right? So isn't this is a class in which all the methods are implemented, right? But still, is this concrete class? No. Yes, Tejas, it depends on the programmer, right? So you have to decide whether if it is a implementation is partial, then I will make the class as abstract. Okay. So you can be sure of this definition. Which definition? A concrete class is a class for which you can create an object. That definition you can definitely depend on. But you cannot say a concrete class is a class in which all the methods are implemented. Because in this case, see, all the methods are implemented. Okay, at least as per what we are thinking, right? So in that case, but what happens? The method is, their class is abstract. So you cannot call this concrete, right? So concrete class is a class whose object can be created. So we'll just see an example for this. Okay, so I'm going to create a class. So I'm going to call this a shape. Okay, shape class. Okay? And in shape class, see, I'm going to say, if I tell you find the area of a shape, can you find the area of a shape? No, how will you find the area of a shape until and unless you get to know what type of shape, right? So I cannot. So I'm going to write void area. Okay, so this is going to be only declared because I don't know how to calculate area until and unless I get to know what type of shape. So a method that is only declared and not defined, what is such a method called as? Abstract method. So I have to keep this method as abstract. Now you see, a class which is having at least one abstract method, what should that class be? Abstract class. Are you understanding? Now all the errors are gone. Okay, a method that is only declared is what is known as abstract method. A class which has at least one abstract method is what is known as an abstract class. So I've created an abstract class. Now, abstract class you cannot create object, but you can definitely extend abstract class. No? So I'm going to create a circle class which extends from shape class. Right? So I will write circle extends shape. Okay, now you tell me, do you really want to create object of circle class? Yes, I want to find the area of circle. No, that is my problem statement. What I want to find, area of circle. Right? So I need to call the area method of circle. So obviously this is a concrete class. So what did I say? If you are a concrete class, you have decided, first itself you have decided I need to create an object of this particular class. So that means I am going to be a concrete class. Then it is compulsory for you to provide the implementation for all the unimplemented methods that is coming from your parent. That is all the abstract methods you have to provide the implementation. See, imagine if you decided, okay, I'm not going to be abstract, concrete, I'm going to be abstract. Okay, I think this is really abstract. Okay, so if I write like this, then there is no compulsion for you. Go ahead, do whatever you want. Are you understanding? But you have decided that you are going to be a concrete class for which you can create object. Then in that case, it is compulsory that you implement the unimplemented method. So if you see over here, there's an option called as unimplemented methods. So it is telling you you have to do this. Otherwise, I'll not let you run the program. Okay. So over here, I can find out the area. So I'm assuming I'm finding out some radius or something. Okay. So this is the as per encapsulation principle, I have to keep the variables private. Then I have to create constructor so that I can put values inside that radius. I cannot hard code. Okay, if I hard code, then every single object will get the same values. So I'm going to generate the constructor. Okay, generated my constructor, parameterized constructor. Plus, it is good practice to always generate the getter and setter. Later, after creation of object, if you want to alter the values, then you need getter and setters. Okay, so generate getters and setters for future in case you want to. So I generated getter and setters. So this is common practice. Okay, all this you should follow. You cannot just leave one and just go ahead. Okay. Okay. And common practice is also to override the toString method. Okay, but we'll not do that because we already have area. All we need is to get the area. Okay. Okay. So over here, in area, what do we need? Abhijit, is what is super, I will explain. Don't worry. Okay. Towards the end, because that has come, that is related to inheritance concept. Okay. So towards the end, just remind me, Abhijit. I tend to forget. I know yesterday somebody had asked me JDK, JRE difference also. I will explain that. Okay, Abhijit, just do it. Huh? Okay, area. So over area, I'm going to write, how do I find the area of a circle? Yes, okay, you can do that. So I'm just going to print out the area. Int area equal to 2 into, yeah, so 2 that is circumference. So yes, 3.14 into r. So Rishikesh has told that. So you can use that. Okay. So radius into radius. Radius into radius into, I can use pi. So in math class, there is already a constant called as pi. Okay. So I will use the actual pi. So it is going to give me a double value. So that is why I'll just write this as double, because multiplying with a double is going to give you a double value anyway. So I'll just print it out here itself, area. Not recommended, because generally what happens, you see what is known as cohesion concept, wherein you say that if your method is called as area, then your task is to only calculate the area. If your method is called as print, then your task is only to print. Understand it? So generally not recommended to do the printing here itself. It's generally recommended to return the area and print it where the area is being called. Okay? But for simplicity's sake, we'll just print it there. And then now we need client code where the main method can be there. Now tell me, main method, can I write it here in circle? No, because circle is not going to be run. Okay, circle is an entity that is going to be used whose shape we want to find. So we need to create a separate client code. So I'm going to create a separate client code. Over here, I'm going to write the main method. And in the main method, I'm typing. Can I write like this? Shape S is equal to new shape. Possible? Can I write like this? No, because object of abstract class you cannot create. Okay, not possible, right? So I can write like this. Circle C equal to new circle. Okay, and see that I'm using the parameterized constructor, right? Because I need to pass the radius also. So suppose I'm saying the radius as 3. Okay, then I'm calling C dot. Anything you want to call inside that particular class, you have to use dot operator. So it's C dot. I want to calculate the area. Okay, and now if I run my program, calculate the area. Fine. So because pi is a large value, it's coming that much. Okay, so it is giving me the area. Now if I write like this, is this allowed to write like this? Yes. See, I'm not creating object of shape. I'm just creating a reference variable of type shape. Parent reference can point to child object. Perfectly valid. Okay? We're not going into detail much about inheritance. It's a full entire chapters that is there for that. Okay? Shape dot area. This is also perfectly fine. So first it will check, is there an area method there in left hand side? Is there one? All it checks is the declaration. It will just check the declaration. Is it there? Yes. Then I will not get a compile time error. Then it will call which area? The one whose object it is. So whose object it is? Circle. So that one's area will be called. Okay. जिसका object उसका method call होता है. Because creation of object happens at runtime. So based at runtime, the method will be specifically called. Okay, so I think it's already 12:22, so I will be able to discuss only abstract class, because now if I take doubts, it will take time. Okay, so interfaces, if somebody has a doubt, then ask me if you have a doubt, but otherwise I think we'll close here and I'll start taking doubts, because there is pending doubts from yesterday also. So can you ask me any doubts that you have? Okay, Abhijit had asked me about super. Okay, super is to call your parent class constructor. Okay, now why parent class constructor? Why is it calling? By default it is calling, right? But why? Okay, just take a, okay, so why is it exactly calling that particular thing? Now see this. If I'm having an employee class, okay, and having a manager. Okay, so manager extends from employee. Manager is a subclass of employee. Right? Is a relationship exists. Okay. Now, if I'm saying that I'm going to create an object of manager, manager has say allowance variable is there, allowance. Okay, employee has employee ID and employee name. Let's imagine a case study. Now I'm creating object of manager. Okay, and when I create object of manager, I'm giving that person an allowance. I'm passing some sort of allowance, 23,000 or whatever. I'm passing some sort of allowance to the manager. Okay, now what happens? You're telling me that you have recruited a manager. The creation of object is kind of like you're telling you're hiring a manager, right? You have recruited a manager. You have given that person allowance also. But what about the employee ID and the employee name? It's like or as if you hired a manager in your company, you started giving that person salary or allowance, even though that person does not even have a name or an employee ID assigned to him. Are you understanding? So this is not the right approach. So what happens is first, always parent initialization should happen first. First, the person, even if that is a subclass, even if it is a manager, that person has to first have employee ID and a name. Only then I can assign that person an allowance. Are you understanding? So first, whose initialization should happen? First, always the parent's initialization should happen. And after that, only the child's initialization should take place. Okay. So in this case, if I'm saying new manager, okay, in the constructor of manager, there is a call to super. So what should I pass? I should pass the employee ID, one. I should pass the name, ABC, whatever the name. And I should pass the allowance when I create the object of manager. So this will come to here, the constructor. Here it will become 1 ABC and then 23,000. Okay, of which these two should go to who? Parent. These two should go to who? Parent, right? So whenever you say you want to call the parent constructor from the child, you use the super. Okay, and then you're telling this 1 and ABC should go to parent. Then in that case, I will initialize my allowance. Okay. So this dot allowance is equal to this allowance. So what happens is that when you create an object of child, always the initialization should happen of the parent, and only after that your initialization should take place. Okay. But in this case, you might think that why exactly over here there is no parent here. There is no. Shape is your parent. Okay, shape is your parent. So always parent initialization should happen. It so happened that the parent has nothing to initialize. Okay, but imagine even if you didn't write this line here, that call is always there. Okay, even if you didn't write, there is always an implicit call to super, whether you write it or don't write it. Okay, so if I write that super over here, it's going to give me an error. Why? Because as per rule, always whose initialization should happen first? Parents initialization should happen first, only then your initialization should happen, right? So in this case, you're doing opposite. You're doing your initialization and then you're trying to do parent. It will directly give you an error. Okay, so it's always the super should be first. So in this case, you're not passing any parameter because there is nothing to pass. Okay, the radius is only in the child. Any other doubt? Please ask me. Any other doubt? You have to choose my name, Bindu, in the chat, and then you can ask me a doubt. No doubts? Everybody understood? At least tell that. Did you understand? Yes or no? Can you type in chat? Yes. Okay. Yesterday somebody had asked me what difference between JDK and JRE. So since you people are not asking me the doubt, I'll just tell. Okay. Fine. Okay. So let me just tell that JDK and JRE. So JDK is Java Development Kit. Okay. Development Kit. Okay. So in JDK, this is what you give to the developers. When you download Java, this is what developers download, the Java Development Kit. In that development kit, what and all will come? So if you go to the JDK's bin folder, you will get some tools that developers use. So developer is the one who's writing the source code, no? So if you make a mistake in the source code, what happens? To check whether the syntax is right, you have to compile, right? So in the JDK, what will you see? In the bin folder, you will find the compiler, right? Developer also needs to run the program, right? So what happens? I need to have the interpreter. Okay, developer Gayatri, yes, I will try to explain little bit. I'll explain about inheritance. Okay, now Java C and Java. Okay, there are tools to find heap analysis tool. There is tools to reverse engineer from dot class file to source code. There are tools to find heap analysis. There are tools to run an applet. Okay, applet here. Now that is archaic, but still there is tools to debug a Java program. So many tools are there for developers. Okay, plus the JDK also comes along with these tools. It also comes with the JRE. Okay, JRE is the Java runtime environment. Java runtime environment. So what is runtime environment? This is not what developers usually download, but even though in JDK you get the JRE, you can download JRE also separately. Okay, in JRE it is meant for who? It is meant for clients. Okay, Abhi, client only needs what? Executable client. Client is not allowed to alter the source code. Whenever you have an SLA with your client and you say that the client will come back to you in case there is need of maintenance, and you are the one who's going to alter the code, not the client. Okay, so in that case the client needs only the executable file. So what is the executable file in Java? The dot class file. I understand it. This dot class file is what is packaged into a jar file and given to the particular client, or a war file, whatever. Yeah? And it is given to the client. It is this one that is needed by the client. So if you want to run a dot class file, do you need compiler? Compiler you need only if you're altering the source code, and client is not going to alter source code. Na? So you do not have Java C. If you see the JRE's bin folder, you will not find the compiler. Understand it? You will only find the interpreter which is necessary to run the class file. Okay, but if I'm running the code, what do I need? I need memory, right? If I'm running the code, I need memory for my program. Okay, I need to bring it into main memory, right? So for that, the interpreter will run the code inside what? The Java virtual machine. The Java virtual machine is going to provide you resources, that is memory and computing power, from the base operating system. So the interpreter will run the code. So what happens? It runs the code byte by byte. So over here, I mean line by line. So in this case, what happens? First line, which is the dot class file's first line, the interpreter will run it on using the resources of JVM, okay, and run it and convert it into native language. Okay, native language means what? The language with which the base operating system is written. Generally, that is C or C++. Okay, and this code the operating system understands. The operating system will convert that into machine code, that is in the form of ones and zeros. Understanding? So you have JDK, which is having what? So many libraries. These are tools that is meant for developers. Okay, tools that is meant for developers plus the JRE. So what does JDK contain? The tools that is meant for developers plus the Java runtime environment. What does Java runtime environment contain? The tools that is meant for only clients. What is needed? Only interpreter is necessary. Okay. Plus what do you need? The library. The library that is needed. Like for example, you have the java.lang package, right? Java.lang package, java.util package, right? All that library is needed. Okay, that comes automatically. For me, I don't have to do that. See over here, you have the JRE system library. You're already seeing that all content here. Okay, I need that to run because if I'm using this over here, I'm using string class, which is inside java.lang package. So I need that to be brought into main memory. They are already pre-compiled. If you see these codes, they are already what? If you see this thing, they are, if you see the extension, they are already pre-compiled. They are dot class files. Are you understanding? Okay. So somebody asked me yesterday, but I forgot to mention it here. Okay. Any other doubt? How can we execute project-based multiple class files file in command prompt? You have to use some sort of jar executor. Okay. So you have to have compile programs, put it as a jar file, and you have to convert it into exe file, because if you're running from command prompt, what happens? The running from command prompt, what happens? It has to be an exe file now, because it is instruction from the base operating system. So you have to convert that into a jar file. So you can get a jar. There is a jar signer that is available. Using that, you can convert it, and then you can execute. You can create a batch file, okay, that can be executed by Windows, suppose. So every operating system, that will vary. If suppose it is a war file, then you want Tomcat. So Tomcat name, there is a folder called as hot deployment folder, which is called a web apps folder. So you put all the .class files there, and then when you launch your web application, then in that case you will create jar file in mobile. See, mobile, if you want to create, you there is no command prompt in mobile, right? So you'll have to create the jar file and copy and paste it into the mobile. Understanding? And to run, see, if you want to run, you have to package it as .apk file, because it depends on your Android operating system. I told you, it depends on operating system to operating system. Abhi, Windows is not there in your mobile, I'm assuming, right? It will be Android. So you need APK file. You have to package it into APK file. So you'll have to search for that. How do I convert a jar file into an APK file, a runnable APK file? If it's Windows, then it's batch file, like that.